Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're talking about avoiding burnout. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was okay. I've had a couple of knocks this week. So one was yesterday I fell over in the forest.
Oh my gosh.
My knee went one way and my body went the other way.
Ah.
And I think we're super lucky that I didn't have a helicopter involved or anything. So I'm definitely looking on the bright side, but it's just so frustrating that you could do something in a tiny split second. And
Sure.
then it's just the things that I did not think I would not be able to do with one leg operational, if you know what I mean. So
Oh my gosh.
that is frustrating.
Well, I know, you just bruise your pinky finger, and suddenly you're like, wow, I use pinky finger for a lot of things.
I know.
And so
who
your
knew
knee.
that was I know. And this morning the girls had to help me put my sock on.
Uh-huh.
They were like, this is messed up. Normally you put out our socks. And I was like, I know, this is a sample of the future.
Oh, man.
Be for you. But, and then also I didn't get this big grant that I submitted. And I got kind of schooled in the reviews. So it was definitely, yeah. I find myself really
burnout.
a week for burnout. So, yeah, I like it that, yes, I'm going to be listening carefully to the advice for not getting burnt out. But it's hard. And it's hard to not be a baby with reviews.
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, reviews can be really harsh, even in the best of circumstances. And second of all, even in the best of circumstances, it's hard to be positive about critique of your proposal. I mean, my goodness.
I know. So it's good though. It gives you a bit of insight into student feelings when sometimes they're like, what do you mean this is my grade? And so maybe,
That's true.
Maybe it's good.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But tell me, how was your week? Injury free, I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I have a nice, we're on this mission, my mom and brother and me, to make chewy brownies. So that's what I have to talk about. Not fudgy. I have nothing against fudgy. Totally love fudgy brownies, but we're trying to figure out how to make chewy brownies. And so far, we only know how to make them from a box.
Okay.
But we found all these recipes. We've tried a bunch of things. The ones I'm going to try today involve malted milk powder, which, as another side note, Ralph and I recently were at our local grocery store, which has a British section, and they had a malt loaf. And we bought it, and it was extremely chewy.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, I have hope that malt will make the brownies chewy. That's
interesting. I want to throw in another suggestion into the ring.
Okay, what's that?
Have you heard of golden syrup?
No.
It's like cane syrup. It's very common in England and Ireland to be used in baking.
Okay.
But it definitely gives a bit of chew into stuff.
Okay. So, well, great. That is fantastic.
Okay,
I will add
golden
it.
Syrup. Awesome.
Can you get it around here?
I got it on the interweb.
Okay.
But I think you might even be able to get it in that supermarket with the thing. Or if you find a recipe, I actually have a 6-pack of it, so I could give you one packet if you want.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks.
Yeah,
I did have to go to the internet for the malted milk powder, so I can do that but that'd be, okay, thanks.
I like your experimentation. I'm into it.
Cool. So do you have a quote for us today?
I do, and my quote is from Hamlet. And so Hamlet was a play that I studied for these big state exams we have to do in Ireland, and I felt very attached to kind of being a dramatic teenager and musing on Hamlet a lot. So anyway, this is my quote from Hamlet. So it's the old favourite. So it's to be or not to be. That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. Okay. So I guess I'm kind of giving away some of my mindset going into this episode. This is I feel like we always have the battle between Claire's relentless positivity and my relentless gloom. And so it's really going to go head to head in this episode.
It so happened that I was the one who said the name of the episode, but we had discussed whether it should be avoiding burnout or just burnout. Or
even how to burn out.
Now that I've heard what week you had, understand a little better.
Yeah, well, so first, before we do, because I feel like this is a bit of a different one, do you want to chat a little bit about what we mean by burnt out? Because I kind of have a specific idea in my head about what it means.
Yes. Why don't you tell us what your idea is, and I'll chime in if there's something
how
else.
I feel right now. No. To me, I read an interesting article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, and it was talking about kind of just, I guess, the extra pressures that everybody is under. And this person was describing how he was in a department meeting and he was talking about doing something to sort of honor the grad students or the students who were about to graduate. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, but do we have to? And everyone kind of stopped and put everything down, because normally apparently he's the cheerleader of kind of all of these sort of things. And he just felt as like he got a lot of emails like, are you okay? And it felt that really resonated with me, where it's, to me, burnout is like almost when you've gone through stress into sort of apathy.
Okay.
And so I think that's how I would sort of define it, or just that, oh, but do I have to do this? Or like losing that kind of energized stuff. So it just seems a little different to me than just being stressed out. Like it's sort of almost the other side of that.
I think that's a great description. I love that image of the faculty meeting. And I guess what I would maybe add is it seems like it comes from prolonged stress.
Yeah.
At some point you're just like, okay, well, I'm done with that. I'm just not going to, not going to work on it anymore, or not going to keep the values that, this guy had his values of having that kind of recognition for the graduates, but he just couldn't handle it right then.
Yeah, totally. Cool. So, sorry why I'm giddy now. It's just so miserable. But so what is working for you about burnout?
Okay, so I have like 3 little parts of this. I think this is why I wanted to call the episode Avoiding Burnout, is because once you're there, it's harder to get out, I think, than avoiding getting in. So some things that I like to do routinely, which I've mentioned before, reminding myself that I enjoy my job. And one thing that I like to do is I have these notifications that pop up on my phone reminding me of things. And some of my favorite ones are positive, focused, enthusiastic. That pops up often, just reminding me this is the state I'm trying to be in here. And one thing at a time, because gosh, if there's the quickest way to get overwhelmed that I know is to have 5 things you're trying to do at once. So just trying to actually say, oh yeah, this is cool. I get to help these students, or I get to work with this data, and trying to give myself opportunities to remember that.
Totally. And I love the way you frame that. And it's not like what they call toxic positivity, where you're like, I just like giving yourself opportunities to remember it, instead of like squashing down any bad feelings to be like, this is awesome. But like,
totally. Sitting there being like, I really enjoy all this. That doesn't work for me.
Isn't that what happened to the guy in The Shining when he's like writing? Oh, yes. Like that could be you. But anyway, yes. So I like that.
And then also, so that's number 1, is trying to insert the times to remember to be in the mindset and state that I want to be in. Then also taking regular time off, and I have underlined this 4 times, the off part, which includes doing non-work things, not checking email.
Yeah.
It's so easy to say, oh, I'll just check, I won't reply, but that doesn't work at all.
No, because it's in your head.
Exactly. Yeah. So, just trying to find ways of getting my brain to forget about upcoming tasks periodically. And not only is that very refreshing, it helps me get back in the right attitude when I get back to work. And so one thing that Ralph and I have been doing that works really well for this is Saturdays is family day, and we're going to do fun things together, and that's just the plan. And so that really helps. I know I'm not going to check an email or do any work things on Saturday, and I enjoy that. And then the last thing is kind of tuning into myself. Like, am I desperately wanting to sit on the couch and read? Well, maybe I need to make some time to sit on the couch and read. And one thing that I've been doing just recently, just this semester, which I've really enjoyed, is taking an hour at the end of the day, like at 6 p.m., kind of evening activities start. We play music, we eat dinner, that kind of thing. And so I stop work at 5, and I have this little hour where I can do whatever I want, time slot for me. And it's usually reading with my feet up, but maybe I want to take a shower, whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
And that transition period of allowing myself to do whatever I want is just really helpful for getting my mind off of the work, doing something nice, having a good evening. It just really sets everything up nicely. So I know that not everyone has the same flexibilities with their schedule, but maybe something that is something similar.
Well, and it doesn't have to be an hour, right?
Right.
Like it
totally.
can just, but yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So those three things help me not get into the burnout phase, I think. And help nip it in the bud and prevent it from happening. So that's what's working for me.
I love it. Okay, awesome. I'm gonna investigate some of those for sure.
Cool. What about you?
Yeah, I think that for me, I think like I thought of it when you said it, but having the tech Sabbath has been really helpful, and
Yes.
I definitely come out of that feeling very different than I went in, if you know what I mean. And so that's been super helpful, and it's just been helpful family wise, to kind of spend time together. Although the kids are kind of the loudest grumblers about it sometimes because they really like listening to audiobooks, and so they're like, but anyway, it definitely always works out to be a good thing. And I think for me, the thing that usually helps is like inspiration. So kind of even things like, I think I've talked to you after I went to the AAPT, and I'm very overexcited and, hearing all of these different things. And so being sort of exposed to other people's cool stuff is
I love it. That's a great
even
idea.
if it's, and just like kind of tickling those sort of thought processes in your head. And I think creative stuff too, and like thinking about things, I don't know, maybe a little, even just like, what's the kind of, how can I do this assignment that it'll be a bit more interesting?
Yes.
And like I make that sounds like I'm trying to make all my assignments very interesting, which is definitely not happening. But when something kind of catches your attention, you're like, oh, that would be cool. Like even, the last time we talked, or one of the previous episodes, you were talking about Gather Town, and that seemed really exciting and like kind of a bit more energy than going just to, so that's kind of cool. And I think I'm beginning to really understand why sabbaticals are a thing for academics. And I think it seems like it's kind of a necessity. It seemed like such a luxury when I first heard about them. And then now that we're coming up to the point where maybe we could take one, it feels more and more like a necessity. Like it would be really, a helpful thing to
Nice
kind of
reset.
get that.
Yeah.
Just a prolonged period to kind of grow back your nerve endings or whatever it is. So, yeah. And I think, honestly, I don't think I've fully gone into burnout. I definitely have touched on it a little bit, but then have always kind of come back from it. So I think,
That's good.
I haven't really hit that. But even, just having even 2 weeks of it is everything feels so much harder. And even things that wouldn't take that long, because I'm resisting them so much, take so much longer. And I mean, I think it's a real thing to worry about and avoid. Like I think it's something that is really, I think our job is so great in so many ways, but it's also very draining in a lot of ways too. So I think, I think it's an important thing to be aware of. And like, we kind of sometimes, there's almost a little bit of heroism about being so stressed all the time.
Sure.
And I think this is like very much a cautionary thing to think about, is like, if you keep being under such extreme stress, what if the elastic band doesn't just snap back afterwards? So kind of being aware of that.
Yeah, and there is kind of a culture where it seems like it's putting in the most hours and being the most stressed means you're the best or something.
Oh, totally.
But you're talking about these things of getting out of burnout, of inspiration, finding inspiration and getting creative. And those are awesome. I hadn't thought about those as being ways of getting out of burnout, but I had thought of them as things that disappear with burnout.
Yeah.
And so how can you be the best if you've lost your creativity because you're so stressed, So
Totally.
to be able to be excited about this new way you want to do the assignment is better.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, it's something I think I often think about it as like it would just sort of be a failing if you did get burnt out, rather than maybe it is like just a natural endpoint to driving yourself too hard, and that we should guard against that. So
I love that. That is so well phrased.
No, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so tell me, what are you working on?
So I'm working on planning to avoid things piling up, because too many things is easy way to get stressed and then therefore burned out. And the times that I can remember recently getting like there were too many things was when I had an exam to grade and I'm on an NSF panel and have all these proposals to read, that kind of thing. But that is schedulable, there's this professor that I was struck by recently where I was trying to schedule, people, the other faculty members come and observe our classes. And I said, oh, will you come observe my class? And he said yes. And we were talking dates. And this was months in advance of the date we were talking about. But he knew that this committee schedule he was on was going to be really busy right then. So he didn't want to come that week, but he could come this previous week. And I was like, wow, that is the way to do it.
That's where you want to get to. That's
exactly
next level scheduling. Yes, totally.
To realize that this week is going to be so what I'm working on is putting things like that on the schedule to hopefully avoid the unnecessary stress by just scheduling them out a little bit. And also, if there is going to be a week where it's like, well, these things all are happening the same week, at least I know in advance and can start early or something.
Right. And even things like, I do feel like I'm getting to this point where I just know the first 3 weeks are really hard for me. Mm-hmm. Like in the semester in general, but this class in particular, I find very difficult. Like not these students, I mean the material, because it's, it's just many reasons why it's difficult in the beginning. And just trying to really acknowledge that and remember that instead of like, oh, I just feel so terrible. I don't know why. Like being like, this is what always happens with this class. And
that's great. So then in future you can know. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you do. Okay, this is fine. This is just the first 3 weeks phase. And schedule extra time for other things. Yeah. Interesting. So I have like on my calendar right now, I have when the exams are happening, because that is kind of a crunch time for me because I have to write the exam and then grade the exam. And that is a lot of time that whole week. So so I've gotten that far, and I'm working to get further.
That's awesome. And I think, one of the plus sides of this sort of online thing is I am much more aware of the sort of schedule of the whole semester than I have been in previous years.
Well, that's great.
So, because I think, it just takes a bit more planning to be like, oh, the lectures have to be up the week before. And, so it's definitely a bit more of the kind of layout of the semester. For sure.
That's great. So what are you working on with Burnout?
Well, I think for me, some of this is sort of unique to the time that we're in.
Okay.
But I think I was thinking about how, and this all sounds more negative about having children than I mean it to, because children are fantastic and wonderful, and they even put your socks on when you've hurt your knee and stuff. So,
how nice.
But there's kind of no respite. Like normally, we used to joke that when they were little, on Friday you'd be like, oh, thank God work is over for the weekend, and then kind of on Monday you'd be like, okay, thank God I'm back in work, because it's hard. But at least the two things were kind of separate. And so in some ways going to work offered a break from being parents. So you come back kind of more excited and like, hooray, children, and I can't wait to see you. And then sometimes doing that kind of brings you back to like, when you go back to work, you're ready to go back to work. And
that makes
at the moment, all time is all things. You know what I mean? And definitely the tech Sabbath helps with that there's like a real solid break from work. But it feels like there's just not the same segmentation, like where you can kind of, I don't know. I can remember being in my office and like looking up cool projects to do with the kids. Because, when you're away from them, you're like, oh, this would be a fun thing to do. But when it's just all happening all at the same time. So I think that's tough. And I think it's sort of funny. Some of this reminds me of what we talked about on here a few times, where you have said, remembering that you do like your job. And I do really like my job. And part of trying to be a bit more sane this semester with distance learning with the kids and being online is I've sort of mentally cut off quite a few things. Like I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that. And in some ways it sort of takes away a little bit of fun about things. Do you know what I
Okay.
mean? Like, say, doing clubs and stuff. I'm just not doing any of those outreach things with students. But they were definitely... And I think that's the right choice to make. I think it's what I need to do to not totally crack up. But then some of those things were kind of generative and creative. And you're like, oh, I wonder what would happen if we'd had an event about this. Or, you know what I mean? And so it's sort of, I think for self-preservation, it's good to cut off those things for right now. But it's interesting to me, like even with this grant that I didn't get, kind of having that in my head as something to think about. And like, oh, I wonder if we could do this and this. Like that was always sort of almost a break in itself from thinking about school stuff. So so that I think is, so I think what I'm trying to think of this week is trying to find other things that are not work related that would be fun things to think about.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you're definitely not alone. I don't have any insights about that, but it sounds like something that's definitely prominent right now.
Well, and this is helpful though. This
Good.
podcast, like doing this and meeting up, because that was something I was thinking also. I don't have a lot of my usual sources of inspiration because, you know, just chatting with your colleagues or department meetings or all of those things are, you know, we sort of complain like, oh, we don't have time for this, but they are generative of good ideas and
it's true.
Cool
it's true.
things. And
that's
so
a good
that's
point.
Definitely something that's missing. But then it's really good to have this instead.
Yeah. Totally. That's really interesting. You're talking about you cut out clubs and those kind of things. Like you used to lead a bunch of clubs and activities on campus. And that's the right decision, but you're missing some aspects. I wonder if you could like target those aspects in particular somehow. I don't know what it would be. But like if you want to stop and think creatively about things, maybe try to find some moments when you could think about, I don't know exactly what it would be, but, you know, try to fill those particular voids. But obviously there's limited time, and so you got to fill the most important voids, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think I think in my head it was so clear, like, oh, just cut off these things because they're not essential. And then even just reflecting and realizing like, oh, but even, you know, they do bring a positive thing. But I'm really into your idea. I think I've been really drawn towards the idea of day reading. So I would love to find a period of time during the day where I would lay down.
Totally.
And it's not the same as like looking at stupid nonsense on your phone.
No,
but
the
like
stupid nonsense on the phone doesn't actually help. I feel like it should,
help.
but it doesn't. Yeah.
No, it never helps. Especially not the doom scrolling nonsense I'm always looking at.
That doesn't help at all.
No.
Doom scrolling, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to propose another thing for a future episode. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that another cool thing is that you've learned some of the perks of leading these clubs, which in future semesters when you're back to leading them will be cool.
Oh,
to
totally.
know.
Because I think I thought of them as just like, oh, this thing I need to do.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
then, yeah.
So that's cool. I mean, it's really cool that you lead all these clubs.
Well,
That's
I
awesome.
don't, yeah. But yeah. But
Anyway,
I was thinking, sabbaticals. I don't
Sabbaticals.
totally know how they work. I
Me
need
neither.
you to figure it out and explain it to me. So
Yeah, I have no idea. I need to look into this too, because we are coming up on the time when we could start applying. I think in the fall we could apply.
Right, I think, and like, but there's all these different versions of it. It's just very confusing to me. So you figure that out.
Okay,
Explain it to
I'll
me,
report back.
Fill in the form. That would be great. Cool.
Perfect.
But I do like, it's so funny to me. Before I was like, well, that's a bit luxurious. You get to, and then now I'm like, oh, that's a medical necessity. You have to have that. So yeah, definitely.
I'm very excited about the idea of like focusing on one, project for the semester.
Yeah.
That sounds really cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
And people always come back from sabbatical just looking like they've been to the spa, or like
Just
they
all
just look like,
radiant.
yeah, and just like super chill, and like really, you can always tell because they're like really generous in their interpretation about students. Like if you're trying to complain and they're like, well, maybe they just, you're like, oh, it's because you've been on sabbatical. Like, so I want to have that glow for sure.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.